Ready whenever Corey is. Welcome, everyone, to Tuesday night here at the Appalachian Writers Workshop. We are very excited for night number 3. It is like, I was in the kitchen earlier, and the kitchen staff were like, it's time to flip the menu over because we're on the back side, which is kind of hard to believe already. And the sadness, the collective awe happens. But that means you have half the week left, and you've had a wonderful half of the week thus far. So we're so excited that you all are here with us tonight. I cannot think of a better lineup of individuals to be on the program this evening, and so why don't we just get that going? But to do that, we need Brandon.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Sun Eagle Gent, and I'm thrilled to introduce someone who is very special to me. Rae Garringer is a writer, oral historian, audio producer, and goat farmer from West Virginia. They're the founder of the oral history project Country Queers, author of Country Queers, A Love Letter from Haymarket Press, and editor of the anthology To Belong Here, a new generation of queer, trans, and two-spirit Appalachian writers from University Press of Kentucky. When it comes to stewarding stories and memories with deep care, commitment, and earned mutual trust, Rae is unparalleled. They're constantly sharing their spotlight with rural queer, trans, and two-spirit peoples in Appalachia and across the country. There's a cinematic quality to their honest, vivid writing style that transports readers from West Virginia to Texas to coastal Maine and beyond, cutting to the heart of hard conversations and seeking justice for the most marginalized at every turn. Rae hates talking about themselves, but I don't. I can't say enough good things about the human behind the pen. I treasure memories of them hauling fresh goat milk and duck eggs into their Airstream trailer, afternoon swims in the New River, Zoom calls with Romp, our queer Southern writers group, a Brokeback Mountain drag dance party in their high tunnel, and them proclaiming from the parking lot to the Ferris wheel that the West by God Virginia State Fair is, and I quote, the best damn state fair in the whole universe. Sounds like some West Virginians here. Nice to see y'all. Rae is a balm to those of us who know that these mountains have always been and will always be more than just straight, white, conservative, cisgender men. Yeah. Keep that up. Please get real rough and rowdy for Rae Garringer.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Brandon. I love you as much as I hate being in front of a room of people behind a microphone. The first time I was at this workshop was 2013, and I was so nervous to read, my vision blurred, like I couldn't see the page, and Marianne saved me. And tonight I can see the page, but I am slightly nauseous, so we'll just see how it goes. So it might make sense. I'm going to do sort of what Wes did. Like, it might make sense to read from one of the two books over there, but I don't want to. So I'm going to read something else. And I was a little bit worried this past week that, this is like a little too queer, a little too trans, a little too explicit. Content warning now, there's some queer sex. It's not everybody's cup of tea. Feel free to take a walk. It'll be over quickly, at least in the context of this essay. It is Leo season. I hope you all are ready. But then, so the other thing that happened this week is that a few of us in the room found out on Friday that a really dear friend of ours died. And we found out that this friend had died over a month ago, and that none of us knew, and in their obituary they were dead named, and a photo pre-transition was used. And so there's been some deep heartbreak this week about our good friend Lil. Oh, I thought I could do this without tearing up. But Lil didn't believe in too much of fucking anything. Lil was a Leo who was 4 feet 10 inches tall and literally like the shiniest, most beautiful trans-anarchist, almost triple Leo you could ever meet. And so, in honor of Lil, I'm gonna trust we can handle it, this essay. I wrote this 2 or 3 years ago. It's just sitting on my computer. I don't actually think it's totally done, but I think this beginning part is mostly done. It's about sort of the nightmare that is trying to date in rural West Virginia for me as a immunocompromised, queer, lefty, non-binary trans person, while also being in a process of pretty intense EMDR work and therapy around emotional abuse and relational trauma. It's called Nobody's Cute, Everyone's Annoying. I think I bruise easily. The other morning in bed, I stretched my legs and noticed a handful of small blue circles scattered across the tops of my thighs like the inverse of sunlight through leaves. A dabbling of dark spots instead of light. None of them hurt, and I can't remember where I got them. I think, most likely, from stepping over the fence between the yard and the duck pen to close them in at night and let them out in the mornings. The fence dips where it was pulled low last summer by the sharp hooves of climbing goats. 5 nights ago, I came home late, just before midnight, after 32 hours at a lesbian country campout wedding. I was too tired to try sleeping in the tent again. The promise of my own bed and a new set of cool, clean sheets was too close to turn down. The necessity of even more small talk in the morning if I stayed another night was too certain, and my worry about the possible return of the raccoon that killed a duck 4 nights before was too loud to ignore. There was no sign of the raccoon when I got home. No new smear of blood across the door of their house. No repeat of finding the remaining ducks huddled in the corner inside, wide-eyed and silent. But one of the ducks was caught between the woven wire and the chicken wire in that same stretch of fence I climb over. One leg twisted around and up behind her at an unnatural and disturbing angle. It is broken, dislocated, or both, and I don't know how to help her other than to keep food and water close. She drags it behind her, hopping on her good leg as she follows the rest of the ducks around. I hope it's healing. The joints of her leg are hot and swollen to the touch, strangely discolored, but still she runs from me when I approach, and when she realizes she can't escape, she gets low to the ground, puffs her feathers up big, stretches her wings out wide, and hisses quietly. It always breaks my heart when they give up and freeze. I'm reminded of last week when my therapist said that the fact I'm much more often in a state of fight or flight these days, after a decade of mostly only being able to access freeze, is a sure sign of healing. I rolled my eyes and made a sarcastic comment about how much fun therapy is, and she laughed with me, which is part of why I trust her. There's one lonely bruise high up on the inside of my thigh, and I'm sure it too is from climbing that sagging fence to let the ducks out before I've made coffee in the early mornings. There have been times in my life when I had near constant bruises from bite marks on the inside of my thighs, some likely in this very spot. How many times have I explained away bruises on my inner biceps? I bumped into something in the woods, I told my brother once in the middle of a family Christmas after he pointed at a large bruise peeking below the arm of my t-shirt. I knew full well that bruise came from my own teeth in a moment of pleasure so intense I almost couldn't take it. I bit down hard against my skin and held on, maybe in some unconscious attempt to tether myself back down to earth. There was a cute young long-haired butch with a dimple at the gay wedding campout fest last weekend. She was a ravenous flirt. It was almost like she didn't know how to communicate without hitting on everyone. A decade ago, maybe even a couple years ago, I would have gone for it, gotten in there and made it happen, or at least asked her to dance because she kept hinting at wanting to. We could have had fun. But by the end of the second day of the wedding fest, I found her perpetual charm exhausting. Thank God, after 15 years of therapy, I can finally see myself making different choices. I flirted back a little but didn't act on it with the long-haired butch at the wedding. And at Charleston Pride a few weeks ago, instead of shyly catching eyes and smiling at a cutie all day and then ignoring them and heading home and regretting it later, I walked up to him, sat down on his blanket, complimented his outfit, and introduced myself. He had a mid-40s trans dad at the beach vibe and striking green eyes, salt and pepper hair. I asked if he lived in Charleston, and he said he lives in New York, and without thinking, my immediate response was, "Why are you here?" And even though his mom lives here, and he grew up here, and he clearly visits, I didn't get his number, because the last thing I need is another long-distance crush, and also because I quickly got shy and bolted off to fill up my metal water bottle at the fountain he pointed out to me. I just added a new sticker to the bottle, which remakes the common car decal you see all over West Virginia, featuring a heart formed from two deer facing each other. One, a buck with horns, the other, a doe without. The deer forming the heart in my sticker both have horns. Buck for buck all day long, and all night too. It doesn't seem like it should be so hard to find, but apparently it is. At least for me it is. At least here it is. When I told my therapist that my one Charleston Pride crush ended up being a New Yorker, she joked that my type is people who live very far away, and she's not wrong. I don't know if it's about aesthetics or politics or something else, but who I'm drawn to often just isn't here, and instead they live in cities full of dozens, sometimes hundreds of options within a 3-mile radius. I always set my dating app preferences to 100 miles, the farthest possible radius, and still I swipe left, left, left on straight couples looking for a femme third and quickly run out of swipes. I did lure one city butch out to the farm from Tinder last fall. 2 full months of intense buildup, hours and hours on the phone and FaceTime, comically lesbianic emotional bonding across distance. None of it made sense. Them in New York trying to have a baby, me in West Virginia hell-bent on not. Them with a huge personality, an interrupter like no other, cocky and funny, which for better or worse I like, but inconsistent, at times pushy, and a terrible listener too. It all made me anxious. But it's hard to turn down a cutie willing to drive 18 hours round trip to meet you after a long dry spell. The closer the visit got, the redder the flags waved, including their irritation when I asked them to take a COVID test because they were sick and I'm immunocompromised. But that train had left the station, and I always get a little blue in the fall, and so they made the trip. And I made them dinner and dessert and mulled wine, and later they came fast and hard on my hand and immediately burst into tears about why they've been dating straight women for years who don't know how to make them come like that. I'm fine with tears. I cry all the time. I'm fine with tears during or after sex even. I understand the body's need for multiple forms of release at once, but dear Lord, haven't I dated enough butches hung up on a bisexual girl who broke their heart by going back to cis men in my 20 years out of the closet. My first hookup since before the pandemic. My first hookup since the most abusive yet, in a very long string of unhealthy relationships, which left me spinning dizzily, briefly suicidal, and questioning my grasp on reality. My first attempt since 2 years of an ulcerative colitis flare-up, which left me dangerously anemic from shitting blood 20 times a day and unable to even fathom having someone in my house, much less my bed. If this is dating, I'm good, thanks. I spun out for a couple days after they raced back to the city in the morning and ghosted me. Then I took myself on all the dates I was going to take them on in the week they'd planned to stay. I bought myself a brand new flannel shirt for the first time ever and a fleece-lined jean jacket for my tiny dog so we could cozy up together through the long, cold nights of November. I texted a selfie of us in our new outfits to a friend in North Carolina, joking that me and my pup will just make our own Brokeback love story where nobody dies or has to marry a straight woman at the end. It'll just be a tale about interspecies cuddles and snacks and walks instead of hot intraspecies butch for butch sexual tension on a steep mountainside surrounded by grazing ruminants. Divine androgyny, my Mississippi friend once called it. To desire it and be desired in it all at once is some rare kind of heaven on this earth. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Lucas, and I have the honor of introducing Marianne Worthington tonight. There are many words that can be used to describe Marianne Worthington: writer, teacher, editor, historian, music lover. She is the author of the poetry collection The Girl Singer, and her numerous other writings have appeared in various publications, including Oxford American. She co-founded Still the Journal, which featured the voices of many people in this room. She also co-edited Piano in a Sycamore, writing lessons from the Appalachian Writers Workshop, which preserves 40 years of craft lessons and exercises. She has taught writing, communications, journalism, and more to countless college students and to fellow writers at workshops and conferences. When I asked Marianne what one word she would use to describe herself, she gave me several words. Chronically anxious, musically inclined, a good mother, caregiver. But my favorite word to describe Marianne is fierce. Talk to Marianne for a couple minutes, and you'll know she tells it like it is. But more importantly, she uses her fierceness to make sure others have the opportunity to tell it like it is too, whether that be through poems in the voices of forgotten and mistreated female country music performers, through her work to help publish new Appalachian voices, or by pushing us to be better writers, better people, and to be fierce in our own right. It is my honor to welcome my fierce friend and our writer-in-residence, Marianne Worthington.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here and so honored to be with Rae and Denton and Jacinda tonight. So I guess I'll read some poems. These are, I'm not going to read anything from The Girl Singer. These are mostly new poems. And I want to start with two poems that are about Knoxville artists. I grew up in Knoxville. And I hope that these two will grow into a series of poems about Knoxville artists. So the first one is about Adelia Armstrong Lutz, who painted at the turn of the last century. She came from a very wealthy family. She was born in Jefferson City, but she came from a very wealthy family that lived in one of those mansions on Kingston Pike that's still standing. And if I was telling Meredith last night that if you know your Appalachian history, she had a brother named Armstrong who married Ann W. Armstrong, who wrote This Day and Time, partly about Knoxville in the 30s. I also found out at the Appalachian Studies meeting, I couldn't believe it, Ann Armstrong lived on North 3rd Avenue in Knoxville, which is the street my grandmother lived on. They were not there at the same time, but we're all connected. We just have to dig around and, find it. So Adelia Armstrong Lutz painted mostly Impressionist style paintings of women and children. And then all of a sudden there's this beautiful painting of two dogs lost in the snow. So this is called Two Hounds, 1895, after a painting by Adelia Armstrong Lutz, Knoxville, Tennessee. Out of her oeuvre of hollyhocks and mannerly women in velvet chairs, she paints two filthy hounds, Tennessee walkers. They stand together in snow, lost in a field by the river. A covered skiff marooned in frozen water, woods, and now the sun about to break the pink sky behind them. Crows leave their roosts to pick at the skies. One hound cowers, the other coughs his choppy bark into the dawn. Tails tucked, adrift in this icy place, they bay for rescue. They face us, the viewer, a mercy in their soft eyes. The craquelure on the canvas now crisscrosses their path, the varnish crackling into lines that could lead to home. Maybe a hunter's shack on House Mountain, up yonder close to her birthplace, far from the mansion on the Tennessee River where she works in her studio as the skylight, warm with winter sun, lifts her heart for these piteous beasts. Thank you. The other more famous painter from Knoxville is Buford Delaney, who had an international reputation. And there's been a whole book of poems written about Buford Delaney. And Knoxville is trying pretty hard to keep his legacy and memory alive. And so this is the painting that I looked at is some people in a church getting ready for a service or choir practice. It's called Rehearsal, 1952, after a painting by Buford Delaney, Knoxville, Tennessee. After New York and Paris, when you came home to Knoxville for a while, Buford, how did you find such luster in the church? Your singers circle around the organist in choir robes, the shade of blood, of grass, of sunshine. In the church windows, a heart, a rose, a dove. Is the purple for your mother, born enslaved? Tell me, how did she teach you to grasp these colors in our city so gray and rough? Buford, I'm ashamed that we grew up in the same place and I never knew who you were. The history I learned in school was whitewashed, wasn't local. No one took us to art museums or cultural centers. My history was one of silence, of euphemism. Yours was vaporized by our city, neighborhoods and businesses and churches flattened under the smokescreen of urban renewal. Buford, your canvas is a gospel I didn't know I needed, a vista that almost makes me want to pray. So I'm trying to write more truthfully and honestly about the place where I was raised, which was a beautiful place. There's no greener place on earth than East Tennessee in the spring and summer. But Knoxville, when I was a kid, Knoxville was real dirty, it was polluted, and of course it was segregated. So I've been trying to write about that sort of history. So this is called The Mockingbird is the State Bird of Tennessee, a High Bun, which we're going to talk about on Thursday, which is a block of prose followed by a haiku. And the epigraph is from Caroline Herring's song, The Dozens. I'm just a white girl from a segregated town, and I'm looking for some answers that I haven't found. We learned to laugh out loud when our fathers hurled their dirty names at the people who lived on the east side of town. We learned to hoot when they hollered out those monikers to the TV while we were watching black men and women sing or dance or pass a ball. Those insults sheltered our neighborhoods like tents, the air smelling like cigarettes and sour politics. We all saw the women at the bus stops in their aproned uniforms and then learned to unsee them as they cleaned the houses of our mothers' well-off church friends on the west side of town. We learned not to ask our mothers what the difference was between a black woman cleaning houses and our grandmothers cleaning houses, because when we did, our mothers slapped our faces or sent us to bed without supper. Even our grandmothers, the ones who cleaned other people's toilets, taught us to lay a dime on the S&W cafeteria tray as the servers positioned our plates and cups on the table they had just wiped clean for us. We learned to lower our expectations for bus drivers, janitors, elevator operators, ticket takers, bathroom attendants, even though our mothers and fathers had those jobs too. Our rationalizations tasted like stale leftovers, and some of us choked. We learned to see the invisible black and white lines drawn by our city. We learned to stay in our lane. Only the mockingbirds cross those margins. We learned to listen for their dispatches, secretly hoping to understand the news from the other side of town. Domestic rules made us sag like birds crowded on wires during rainstorms. So I had this cousin who I grew up with, and our grandmother lived in her house, and they lived up the street from us, so I could walk up the street and go see my cousins and my grandmother anytime I wanted to. But my cousin was notorious for having dogs that were absolutely the most rotten, spoiled, rotten creatures in the world. And she would cook for her dogs. And I know that that's not so unusual, but I'm finding myself doing the same thing. This is Lament for My Late Cousin While Feeding the Dog. Standing at my stove now, I've become that part of you I used to laugh at as I scramble eggs or poach a chicken or boil carrots for my old dog. She snubs her bowl, like yours used to, if nothing extra is heaped atop her kibble. Like yours used to, my dog gives me the side eye, shuffles off to pout in the hallway. Remember how our mothers, our grandmother, whisked up quick gravies to drivel over a dry bowl of dog chow? Remember how they saved back gristly bits of Sunday roast to feed their dogs under the table, despite our father's hostilities? Remember how all our dogs jumped and sang in our sunny kitchens? I can't help it. I want all of us back together, drinking Cokes and playing canasta, the linoleum spotted with old dogs napping and dreaming in the sunlit patches. Thank you. Here's a flood poem. Sorry, but it is a flood poem, kind of, sort of. It's going to be in Hilda Downer's anthology that she's putting together about Helene in North Carolina. It's called I Came to Rest in a Body of Water. The way the lake held my body afloat, the way the green waters lapped across my belly while suspended on my back, the way the sun ripples light across my feet, the way the soft waves bob me up and back down as I watched the waves dance to the shore. Once I learned to swim, no one made me wear life jackets in the lake. The way I trusted the water to keep me buoyant and supple, like my young body, all legs and arms paddling and treading, not yet accustomed to the hard slaps of currents, the near drownings, and the undertow. So earlier this year, I took Melissa's makery class, and Sarah Henning was in that class, and maybe some others of you who are here. It was the greatest thing, and I hope she offers it again. And also, our tuition went to sponsor the Ironwood Studios, so it was a great thing. And I've written I got a couple of poems from that workshop. So if you don't like them, you can blame Melissa. So the first was to challenge us to write about where we live and to, show contradiction. So this is about my home in southeastern Kentucky. Here is where we live. In the burn of summer, the mower cuts off his Troy built, pushes down to the creek to cool off. Creek water sighs under a canopy of scrub pines and Kentucky coffee trees. The bank is slick with moss. The air smells new. Sometimes in summer, we cool off inside the vendor's mall. Keith bends and starts the dirty work of thumbing the boxes of comic books. I hunt for the familiar. Cherry red isomat ice crushers, flame-tipped kitchen tools, scarlet Fiesta-ware pitchers, all the fiery things my mother had in her red kitchen. At the creek, crows are flying in to rest at the cool spot. Sometimes they gossip. I miss the little neighbor dog who crossed the creek daily, her wet feet printed on my porch. I browse the books, military histories, yearbooks from the college where we taught, an unabridged library of Bible scholarship moldering on the shelves. Here is where we live, among the mildew and cast-off of our neighbors, their kids' stuff, bunk beds and toys, TVs, clothing, a spinet piano in the back corner, National Geographics, and a creek washing the limestone, feeding into the Cumberland River that flows unbroken behind the old Piggly Wiggly, the Sonic, and the Vendor's Mall. And this other poem we brought to a class one night all kinds of prompts or, things that might make us write something. And Sarah Henning brought an article, a science article about the Earth's rotation. So you'll hear lines from that at the beginning, at the end. And Melissa gave us a quote from one of her poetry teachers, and that's in here. And there were photographs that we looked at. This is what came of it. Also, I remember, I titled it this because I remember when I was in college, my speech and debate teacher asked us, he was trying to get us to be more rigorous about citing sources, and he said, who knows what the most quoted authority is? Do y'all know? The most quoted authority? No. You're way off. They. It's true, isn't it? That's what they said. Okay, so this is called What They Found. What they found. They found that the inner core of Earth once spun faster than Earth itself. They found that when two dogs fight, the wildness disperses through the atmosphere and enters our bodies. That's why there is always war. Honey, they found that old women leaning on their canes are generally ignored. You don't believe them? Ask any old woman the last time she was validated by family or stranger. They found that shame is now absent from the world. Shame went back to live in that abandoned coffee truck down by the flood wall, the one where the mice have made a home in the seats and live in peace undisturbed. They found my cousin's child unresponsive in her apartment, but they won't say what happened to her. They said Surviving the fire by becoming the fire is not surviving the fire. They said, if you break from the past, you might burst wide open into a new being. They said, try it. But we said, no, this is how we've always done it. They found that if you tell lies, you'll start to believe them, and then other people will believe them, and before you know it, you're living in a fascist state. They found that in 2010, a decade before the world changed forever, the spin of the Earth's solid inner core had slowed. It's now revolving backward. So this is the last poem, and it's a villanelle, which is a type of poetry form where there's some rhythm and some rhyming. And it's called Hunter's Moon. At the creek bed, my dog and I quit our walk and watched the water for minnows. Late last night, the sky was lit. Even barred with clouds, I could knit together the shadow shapes from my window to my backyard, where earlier we had quit walking just to rest and watch the creek water fit itself perfectly between banks, winnowing the clay. Late last night, the sky lit up across the world as bombs writ the air with their awful script. No home, no child is safe. At the creek, I want to quit thinking how wars always forfeit the innocent and nowhere in sight a hero. Later tonight, the sky will be lit again with a moon, a blood orange blanket, and children will keep dying no matter that at the creek bed my dog and I quit. Late tonight, the sky will be lit. Thank you all. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Hello. If you don't know me, I'm Lacey Snap, and I'm here tonight to introduce Denton Loving. First, a few truths and a lie, which are all contributed by reliable sources in this room. He is a Libra. He swam the English Channel. He has a writing retreat called the Orchard Keeper. His favorite Midwestern city is Eau Claire, followed by Omaha. And I'll let you ask him later what is true and what is a lie. He'd love that, I'm sure. Before reading his poem Hurdling on the Beat podcast, Denton tried to say that dreams are the most interesting part of his life because he considers himself to be, quote, pretty boring. I think all of us who know him can agree his waking life is anything but boring. He lives in Cumberland Gap at the meeting point of Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. His first book from Main Street Rag is Crimes Against Birds, which is also fondly known as Crimes Against Cows. His second book, Tamp, from Mercer University Press, was a finalist for the Weatherford Award and a recipient of the inaugural Tennessee Book Award for Poetry. He is the editor of Seeking Its Own Level, an anthology of writings about water. He's a co-founder and an editor at Eastover Press and its literary journal Cutleaf. He was formerly the co-director of the Mountain Heritage Literary Festival and co-editor of Draft Horse of Work and No Work. He earned an MFA from Bennington College, and his fiction, poetry, essays, reviews, and interviews have appeared in numerous publications. We are an especially lucky group because tonight will be his first official, unofficial reading for his latest collection, Feller, from Mercer University Press. Here at Heinemann, we're getting to see the book before its official publication date in a couple of weeks on August 5th. So go back there and get yourself a copy. To close, I wanted to share a few lines of what the poet Annie Woodford tells us about Feller. These poems shimmer and shapeshift like the dual meaning inherent in the collection's title. So too do the speakers in these poems, who are both vulnerable humans and conduits through which lyrical ecstasy passes. These are love poems, lost poems, poems that, quote, open doors to new worlds. Reading Feller is a transformative, joyful, loneliness-alleviating experience. I think we're all honored to get to be some of the first listeners of these poems, which provide transformation, joy, and an alleviation of loneliness, all of which I think are the lifeblood of our time together here at Heinemann. So please join me in welcoming Denton Loving.
Is this okay? Is that all right? Yeah. Thank you, Lacey. Lacey made me sound much more interesting than I actually am, I promise. That was beautiful, Lacey. Thank you. I also want to thank Josh and Melissa and Will for bringing me to Heinemann for this year. I started to come to Heinemann for the first time in 2006. I came for 6 years. 2012 was my last year. And it's a dream come true to come back here and to be with you all, to stand on this stage where so many of my heroes have been before. It's also very exciting and fun. I'm so grateful that this is the first place that I can share these poems with real people. You know, I've talked to some people online about the poems and done some video interviews, but this is the first time that I'm holding the book in my hand, and I'm a little nervous about it. I have no idea what I'm doing. I haven't figured out how to talk about this book yet. I'm sorry about that. You'll have to bear with me. Thank you. Thanks. What is this book about? I'm not entirely sure how to talk about it myself. It's about longing, and it's about love, and it's about connection, the connection that we all need to feel with each other. It's not only about romantic love, but the love that we have for the people around us and for the place around us, and for the longing that we feel to be where we are and where we want to be, where we want to go, where we can't always reach for at the right time. So I started out my workshop this week with some love poems, and I want to also say thank you to everybody who's been in the workshop. You all have made the last couple of days so much fun. I can't believe we've only met for 2 days so far. It seems like a week already, but it's been great. So I'm going to share a couple of love poems to start out with. This is Lock the Moon. Let's lock the moon where it sits in the eastern sky, as two raccoons wrestle over cat food, knock about the water bowl, and leave tracks that vanish in the dew. Everywhere, fireflies engage in their own urgent fracas. The cats ignore it all. Let's divide the sky into 5 quarters. On a plate of gold, I will cut the flesh from the stone and serve it to you. I was reborn the night we met, a night like this with fireflies and trains traveling cross-continent. But in what direction do we move? Climb this tree with me, my love. Place 1 foot here, push yourself up, and I will pull. Ignore the moon, always laughing at desire. So many of these poems in this book are set here in Appalachia, but there are also poems that are outside of our region. One of the most beautiful, most memorable weeks of my life was on a lake in Minnesota called Lake Sagadagan. And this is called Lake Sagadagan Summer. After evensong at the Abbey, we walk circles in the woods, weaving through deer flies and kamikaze flights. The cerulean warbler mates among these trees, we're told, so we keep vigil for blue flickers in leaves. So far, nothing. On half-submerged logs, turtles perch like hard-shelled gods. We canoe to the deepest part of the lake before we can talk about who we were before the other existed as our witness. Night descends, and we have to compete with the liturgy of loons, but here, surrounded by water, by darkness, is the only safe place to tell the truth. A lot of the poems in this book, like the poems in my second book, Tamp, are centered around the place where I live, the farm where I grew up, where a piece of land that was very important to my dad, and a place where I still feel intimately connected. This poem is called "Do You Hear the Cicadas?" And how about the whippoorwill? I hear him late into night, nearly 4 decades gone from these wooded foothills, but returned to sound his warrior song. Whippoorwill, whippoorwill, turf warning as well as mating call, a blast that rips through my sleep some nights and leaves me to lie awake and wonder about choices I've made. And I wonder why the whippoorwill was so long silent, probably too much pesticide, not enough moths and beetles, all the too usual reasons. What makes him think things will be different this time? What calls him back? What sustains this small nightjar's blind bravery? One of the things that I like to do in my poetry is, as just a way to keep myself entertained, is to interrogate the language. So I'm doing that a little bit in this poem. It's called "The Word of the Day is Largesse." From the Latin largus, meaning not just big, but abundant, generous. I am blessed by the largesse of those who came before me, benefactors bestowing aid and alms, though no one these days gives alms, another ancient word, this one from Greek, akin to compassion. After Artemis transformed Hippocrates' daughter into a sea serpent, men seeking the largesse of her father lined up to free the girl with their kiss, yet those men fled the serpent's scaly mouth, her split tongue, her poisoned breath. Did I mention those men each died soon after? The moral is, if you can't love with compassion, just get out. Leave. I've been reading mythology and backbone recipes like a man sizing up a bear. The backbone, or what's left after the ribs are cut, is prized for its flavor and tenderness. Pork is good, but bear is better. Makes delicious broth, soup, and stir fries. It was the only meat Davy Crockett would eat. He killed hundreds of bears, leaving his wife for weeks to hunt. To prepare your own backbone, ensure your cleaver is sharp. Hack the meat into small pieces. Saute generous, abundant amounts of aromatics. Brown the meat and mix together. Savor, be sure you have plenty to give away. This is another poem that takes us outside of the region, and it's called Breach. All our conversations circle back to desire, you wanting to know what I want, using desire singular, as if I only have one when I'm normally drowning in them. I sailed once to South Africa's Western Cape to witness southern right whales breaching. I wasn't impressed at the penguin beach, but the baleen mothers and their calves breaking the horizon, splashing salt spray, that quickened my pulse. The whole pod swam closer to observe us. I wanted to dive in, to give myself to their body of water, but my guide held me back, reminding me the ocean we desire might desire us to live a little longer on land. As I said, one of the threads of longing that I think this book is about has a lot to do with place. And Lacey and I were talking yesterday, I guess, seems like it was a month ago, that about that need when we're here to think about going somewhere else or being somewhere else, and then when we're there thinking about how quickly we can get back home, right? I think that's pretty common for most of us in Appalachia. But this poem is for Lacey. This is Returning. My heart is divided, split in devotion to where I am and where I want to be. My wish to sew my own lifeline with a single, simple thread is thwarted by these rolling Appalachians, their foothills and low reliefs. So my path unwinds like cable stitch that twins and twists but never breaks. Another thing that I did in this book was that I found myself writing a lot of epistolary poems. So there are to a variety of people. Some of them are to real individuals from my life or my past. There's one to a television personality. And I felt compelled to write this letter to Rilke. You say to have patience with everything unsolved in my heart and to cherish the questions, but I'm bursting with so much that is unnamed and unsolvable. I've not yet learned to treasure locked doors, rooms I've not been given access to. I've not yet learned to be brave in the face of the inexplicable. Last month, my sister died suddenly, and I have yet to mourn. She was 47 years old, even younger than you when ulcers filled your mouth instead of poems. Yesterday, I flashed my hazards and stopped my car on a busy road to help a box turtle reach the other side, a small gesture for a species that has endured this earth for 200 million years, before lizards, before crocodiles, long before there were snakes in Eden. Think of all the strange tongues she has known and forgotten. Is a language for grief one of them? Is she like us unspeakably alone? The turtle reveals nothing. Last week, flying from LaGuardia, I sat in a window seat in an exit row. I considered the emergency door, those few inches of carbon fiber composite separating me from clouds and sky, an airtight lock and latch, another door with the future on one side and me on the other, afraid to die and afraid not to, which is to say, afraid to live. Wes Brown said that the reason Mercer University Press shrink wraps all the books is because it's so dirty you can't see inside. That's not true. Wes is going to be very disappointed. This is about the dirtiest poem there is in the book. And it's called Outside San Miguel. Highland breezes blew through your new backyard outside Montañas de San Miguel. The coolest August evening either of us could remember, but we lost our clothes, submersed ourselves in the distortion of underwater light and shadow. You didn't mind the cold, but I shivered as the water closed over our heads. Afterwards, driving north on the interstate long after midnight, searching for a reported blue moon through drifting fog, I carried with me the memory of my teeth on the slope of your clavicle, how I loved that word and still do, how I still dream of that slight ridge rising from the topography of your body. The moon never reached itself through the mist. No roads wound back to those mountains. My letter returned in the mail with no forwarding address, further evidence of your myth. A lost continent, a lost continent the water closed over. Thank you. A lot of you are probably familiar, there are some trees that hold on to their leaves late past winter. They're the last of the old brown leaves that cling right before spring comes, right? That process is called marcescence, and that's the name of the poem. Strange how the Latin meant only to fade, but now the word, reserved for botany, means to wither but also persist, to dim but linger, dwindle but endure. A term for trees like the beech that hold thinly bronzed leaves long into winter, awaiting that secret signal to wake. Yes, we know what the beech needs, warmer days, a change in the light, but how much? Exactly how much? Strange how even a tree has desires. Strange how until something new grows, what no longer serves us will cling. There's a lot of trees in this poem, a lot of visitations to the woods. And so when we talked about the cover design for this book, I knew that there would be a tree involved. And I was thus surprised a little bit when there was not a tree, but there was an octopus. And it wasn't a total shock because I understood where the octopus came from. It just was a surprise to me that this was the image that the designers felt best spoke to the entire book. I'm not mad about it in any way. This is called The Octopus School of Poetry. And I want to, one of my students I told was no longer allowed to use the word hearts in their poems for a moratorium of like a year at least. So this is for you, okay? The Octopus School of Poetry. Yes, that they have 3 hearts is remarkable. So too the way they navigate man-made mazes, that their 8 arms simultaneously perform separate tasks, that they can unscrew jar lids even when they're trapped inside the glass. But of all the strange facts, I can't get past their ability to squirt jets of black ink. Theatrical for sure, but an effective tactic to distract a hungry eel or seal or albatross, not unlike the poem shooting fireworks to ward off what haunts us. Such a nifty trick, almost worth the burden of those extra hearts. I'm going to close with the title poem and just say that for all the longing there is in the world, there's so much heartbreak, right? I hope this poem speaks to the answer to that heartbreak. And this is the title poem, Feller. This is the white oak that grew among other oaks and beech, pine, and hemlock. This is the tag that marks the tree. This is the saw with whirring blades. This is the sawdust that thickens the air. Praise the machine and the task it achieves. This is the creak of the trunk splitting. This is the fracturing of fibrous limbs as they bend and break. Praise the thunder of the falling. Praise the quake of the earth accepting the weight. This is the log hauled to the sawmill, cut into lumber, measured by board feet. Praise the planks that will shape a dwelling. This is the crown of the tree. These are the branches left to rot. This is the wood's cellulose and lignin that replenish the soil. These are the fungi, the beetles, and the earthworms that flourish in the oak's remains. Praise decay and decomposition. This is the feller who brought the tree down. Praise the worker and the work of felling trees. Praise the quickening pulse and the flowing blood. This is the first green leaf from last year's acorn taking root. This is the light that enters the woods and cleanses the wound. Praise the wood and the woods. Praise the light. Praise the wound. Thank you all so much.
Hi, my name is Erin Reed, and I have the pleasure of being in Jacinda Townsend's novel workshop this summer, and I have the honor of introducing her. Jacinda grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and currently holds a position of assistant professor at Brown University. At the age of 16, just 16 years old, she went to Harvard, where she took a creative writing course that sparked her love for the craft. She continued to write during law school at Duke University. In fact, she took writing courses on the side and published her first short story during that time. After law school, she had careers as a broadcast journalist and as an antitrust lawyer before eventually pursuing that long-fostered love of writing by earning an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Jacinda published her first novel, Saint Monkey, in 2014. She calls the book a love letter to the black community in 1950s Eastern Kentucky. Saint Monkey received numerous accolades, including the 2015 Janet Heidinger Kafka Prize for Fiction, the James Fenimore Cooper Prize for Historical Fiction, and the 2015 Honor Book of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Lots of awards. Jacinda's second novel, Mother Country, was inspired by her Fulbright Fellowship in Côte d'Ivoire. During that period, she spent time in Morocco, where she encountered escapees from modern-day slavery from nearby Mauritania. The voices of those women she encountered are reflected in the novel, which won the 2023 Ernest Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. One of the things I admire about Jacinda is she's a fierce advocate for justice. She is unafraid to speak her mind. And even more admirable, I think, is that she has turned her passion for justice into action by serving as an elected official in both Indiana and Michigan. Jacinda's also a big Star Wars fan, and let me tell you, the Force is strong with Jacinda. Let's welcome her to the stage.
Thank you so much, Erin. And Erin, it's so nice to meet you because you're even more of a hoot in person than you are on Facebook. So, thank you. And I just, thank you to you all for being here. I always say, like, coming to Hyndman is like the best week of my whole writing year because I think Appalachian writers do community better than any other writers, right? So, thank you. So, I am going to self-edit as I read to take this from rated R to PG-13, but if your mama doesn't let you watch those kind of movies, you might want to leave. Yes. Yeah. Push the bar down. There we go. Is that good? All right. Okay. How many people in here are or have been happily divorced? Woo! Yes. So, if you are divorced and living your best life, this is for you. The only kind of preface I will give to this is that Myron has his wife has just filed for divorce, and he has just found out that her maiden name was not her real name. So he doesn't know why yet, but this is what he's just discovered. And now he understood. She was a trick floor pulled out from under his feet, a photographer's stop bath, an era of herself only temporarily arrested. And now she'd evolved in some way he hadn't. She'd run in another direction, past where he was standing. She'd asked for half the house, unmoored from his port to sail clear. Now Myron stood at the door of the Brown Hotel's Secretariat Ballroom, scrolling through Lexus Plus in order to play it cool. He hadn't yet signed into this speed dating event. He wanted to assess the cattle chute first. And he wanted to look in the suit and tie he never really wore to work, like a man who had more important business to attend to, anyway, than being rejected by one of the many women who might sneer at him and speed right along. He'd felt ridiculous parking on Forest Street in his little Honda Civic. He needed a muscle car for Derby City speed dating, possibly something American, a Corvette, or at least a Mustang. He might even actually meet someone, he imagined, but then she'd walk out of the hotel chatting with him, get a gander at his tiny, energy-efficient car, stop mid-sentence, and say, "Aw, cute, you must have kids." About 30 people had signed in ahead of him and gotten their name tags. He'd watched them bending over the welcome table, writing their names hopefully on generic labels, the women pushing their purses back up their shoulders, the men shoving their hands in their pockets, taking them out, shoving them back in. Most of them were younger, in their 30s, and he wondered if this would matter as the evening danced forth. One of his colleagues, Mark Wisniewski, had promised him that he'd be a hit. The 30-somethings all have daddy issues, he'd said. And Wisniewski had been so often right about so many things. Myron swallowed the juice of his nerves, felt a sheen of moisture in his armpits. He smelled the amplification of his cologne, a smell not of his own unwashed body, but of his cologne as if heated stovetop in a pan. It was doing its job then. He might meet a woman. He stepped to the table, scanned the event's QR code, paid his $45. "Welcome," said an event staffer, a woman who looked to be half his age. She slipped a label toward him, and he wrote Myron at the top of the tag in tiny enough letters that he could include Hurley at the bottom, then thought better of it. Who at that sort of thing would reveal their last name? He thought of writing a new name tag in correction, but decided against it. The tiny letters were a broadcast. He had no complexes about his size. He stepped into the room where had formed two gender-sorted lines like a Shaker meeting. He was to proceed from the fore to the aft, he saw, of this soul train of heterosexual courtship. He shook hands with each woman as he passed himself down their queue. Two were named Jen. One of the Jens had applied a provocative amount of lipstick and wore a tight black dress whose shoulders didn't quite cover the blue strap of her bra. The other Jen, with her wire-rimmed glasses, tennis shoes, baggy pants, and limp handshake, seemed to have just rolled out of bed. He shook the hands of women in shorts, women in miniskirts, women in jeggings, women who looked like a very good time, and women who looked like too good of a time. He was realizing, in a way he hadn't previously, that he was an ass man. The men, too, were an assortment. Only one other wore a suit and tie. Myron took him for his lone socioeconomic competitor. He was about 10 years younger than Myron and had gelled his jet black hair down to look like a Valentino. His suit fit him in a way that suggested hours at a gym. He was an all-powerful bishop that Myron might nonetheless rook out of the way. Everyone had sorted themselves out nicely, Myron thought. It was a revelation. He'd wondered whether he wasn't, as a newly single man, playing checkers, jumping over women on his way to wholeness. Or perhaps playing chess, hoping to end up with a cleared board at the end, only one queen to protect him. But the piece he ended up with was a woman named Matilda, who messaged him after Derby City speed dating, and whom he'd messaged back, he knew now, in a fit of madness. But sleeping with a stranger seemed far more manly than sleeping with a woman you'd known since you were 18, and for the preceding 2 decades, that was all he'd done with his sex life. Though when Matilde showed up at Starbucks, both of her bare arms sleeved in the tattoos he'd since forgotten, he'd wondered if he'd ever catch up to men his age. Instead of hugging him or shaking his hand, Matilde pinched his shirt collar between her fingers, zipped them over, ran a hand down his chest. She said, expensive. You said you're a lawyer, Rae. My parents would love you. Nice to see you again, he said. She laughed. Matilda was high on something. He could tell by the glaze of her eyes and the way she rocked back and forth while standing in line, moving her hips as if she were surfing waves. When at last they had their coffee and he was walking toward a table, she swatted his ass. Take me to your car, she said. He obeyed because there were so many things he had yet to do with his penis. And is this still PG-13? Okay. And Matilde was the shining example of all of them. He imagined she'd say yes to something he'd never had. He noted the way she'd chopped her hair off just before her hips, where both it and the hips would draw the most attention, and he imagined her ringing up some tattooed sister for a menage a trois. A threesome, he asked her when she got in his car and kissed him. You ever done a threesome? Oh my, she said. Her laugh was a chainsaw that started and stopped in fence. You've been smoking the good kush too, she said. She lay back in her seat then, closed her eyes and smiled, and instantly fell asleep. He meant to slide his hand up her thigh. Instead, he found himself smoothing her skirt closed where it had fallen open. He heard a rushing trickle of water, saw it dribble out of his car seat at the exact same time the parental memory came. This was the sound of peace. Hey, he yelled. He pushed her arm where an image of Fidel Castro stared at him. Hey, Matilde, you're pissing in my car. She woke up all apologies. She got out of his car crying and ran away. Myron went home and mixed aquavit, ginger ale, and blackberry syrup in a drink he called a Black Viking. And as he got drunker and drunker, he became ever more sure that marriage, that undemanding stasis, had ruined him for adult dating. It required a kind of forgiving and forgetting that only fish had. Still, there were other kinds of hope, and Myron had gone to bed thinking it was the last day of the dowdy part of his life. Saturday would begin the rest of it. God's last day of work was the day Myron would start anew. Thank you.
Well, that was unexpected. We went on a journey together, y'all. That was amazing. Round of applause for all of our fantastic readers. I haven't gone to a denominational church in about 3 decades, but this is my favorite church when you all are up here reading. So this is fantastic. Thank you guys. Thanks for everybody who's watching this online or watching this later. Have a great night. And if you're going to play trivia,